Hello, hello, it's me. For anyone that is going to click on this video and then realize this is a drawing, and then angrily click off, quick update. I've been working on an animation, that's what I've been up to. I haven't actually started it yet, and part of the reason why for that is because I had to hire out a lot of voice actors. If you've been following my Twitter, then you know exactly what's going on with that. Not going to go too much into it, but basically just waiting on people to get back to you and so forth and so on. That created some delays, so now I'm kind of stuck in the middle of a bunch of scheduling conflicts. In addition, a bunch of health problems and adventures with insurance because it's that time of the year, and taxes. Also, I've been doing a bunch of streams on Twitch and Picardo. We finally finished off streaming TNG, Star Trek, on Picardo. That is finally over, aside from the movies, of course. So that's nice. Other than that, I want to make sure that I at least got one video out before the end of the year in December, just for the hell of it. So quickly, I put everything else on pause and decided to draw a cute little sticks picture. Why sticks? I don't know. I think I saw something that day, and I was like, oh, that's cute. I think, I'm not going to go down the history of it. But yeah, I think I saw an image that was like, oh yeah, I always enjoyed drawing that model. So I decided to do that because I thought, well, the Sonic movie thing is supposedly sometime around this time frame. So I decided to just roll with that. I had a few other options, but I figured, what the hell. Alright. So, with this particular image, there's a number of things I want to talk about, I guess. But just to go ahead and get the particulars of the primary out of the way. I've been trying more and more to focus on like lensing and perspective and trying to make more dynamic looking images, which is incredibly difficult for a number of reasons. As I've talked about in a prior video, I have a tendency to flatten out my images as I keep going, which is sort of natural. It's kind of a good thing in a way because you can make things so overly lensed and dynamic looking that it loses any coherence to the overall composition of the image anyways. So it's not too bad. By the end of this particular drawing, it ends up being alright. It's not the greatest thing that's ever been made, but and I didn't succeed with I didn't have absolute victory over my enemy, which is myself. But it ended up being good enough. The primary was really the most... Really, this looks almost exactly like the final image, but I ended up doing like, I guess like 3 or 4 primary passes just trying to work out the exact proportions to the model, because the Sonic characters, if I ever do a drawing of Sonic characters, as you can see, like here, the horizon needs to be lensed a little bit more and things of that nature. I end up fixing a lot of this, but it's one of those things that by eye, it's kind of hard to read. But with Sonic characters, I'm always trying to fight against what their natural proportions should be versus what I want them to be. I don't much care for the way that they designed the Sonic characters. A lot of, like especially in the IDW run, they're handled really well. There's a lot of cheating that you sort of have to do in regards to the model of the characters to be able to make them look a little bit natural without making them too horrifying looking, because that's kind of the problem with the Sonic characters. The Sonic movie sort of had to deal with this issue as well. I don't know anything about the behind the scenes of that. No, absolutely nothing about it. However, looking at it, I do sort of get the impression... However, I'm going to talk out my ass, right? However, looking at the way that sort of things were handled, I do sort of get the impression that there was maybe 1 or 2 people that were a little bit too high up for the opinion that they had. They were very insistent on trying to fix the Sonic design or make it look more, and here you go, where I'm saying I'm trying to fix the proportions. Everything looks just slightly off with this primary, so I have to go back over it over and over and over again. But I really do get the impression that there may have been some higher-ups that were working against the grain of what was established as far as this design goes, because they were trying to do the whole Hollywood We'll bring it into real life. We'll bring it into something that everyone knows, so we don't have to establish a setting. We don't have to worry about it being too weird for general audiences. And that probably led itself to the idea of trying to fix Sonic's design in a way that makes him look realistic, so he looks like something that could belong in the world. And even though the design, in some people's eyes, and I don't really agree or disagree, I'm just saying this, in some people's eyes it's fixed now in regards to the movie. It's still, like, the premise of the movies still remains, right? Because and here I am, like, I'm getting frustrated with the way it's sort of lensing itself, so I decided to do some good old-fashioned perspective lines. With the movie, the whole idea of Sonic, except he's in our world now, whoa! Like, I really wish they had just not done that. I get why they did it, and for general audiences, like, even me, I don't know that much about the Sonic universe, but I am more familiar than your your average daywalker. Daywalker. It doesn't even make any sense for the reference I'm making. But for your average person, I know a little bit more than that, obviously. And the rules of the Sonic universe never make any sense. Like, the whole idea of there are humans, but there aren't humans. Sometimes there are more. Sometimes it's Earth. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes there used to be humans and now there isn't. Whenever the very first game came out, there was sort of this... I guess the common sentiment was that the Sonic universe, of course you weren't really supposed to think about it, it's just there were cute animals, and you kind of get the impression that Sonic was just a particularly healthy, virile hedgehog that was extremely fast for some reason. Like, he was born a certain way, maybe, and he was just fast because he was a mascot character. And he was rescuing his friends, who were like bluebirds and things like that. So just, he was an animal, and that was kind of the end of it. Eggman was there. He was some sort of weird fat human, and you thought, well, maybe he's like from another planet, or like he's from Earth, or he's experimenting with animals, and that's where Sonic came from. And I think even the original run of the comics, they gave Sonic this inane origin story where he was this really ugly brown hedgehog that still sort of looked like Sonic, but he was a little bit more fucked up looking. And he was being experimented on, and it was due to those experiments that he was transformed into Sonic the Hedgehog, and he was blue, and his quills were a little bit more cartoonish as a result. It was really ridiculous. But that's where that came from, is this original sentiment of that's how Sonic works, probably. That's what the setting seemed like it was at the time. And of course now, it seems to change. Like, now there's time travel and alternate dimensions. Like, Blaze the cat, I think, isn't even from their dimension. She's from some other dimension where there are like Chaos Emeralds, but they're not called Chaos Emeralds. They're like Soul Emeralds. And oh gosh, it's just such a mess. So I get why. I definitely understand why Hollywood was like, the writer was reading all this information on a wiki page somewhere. It was like, oh, fuck this. I'm not doing that shit. And decided, you know what? They're just in the real world now. I can also understand why they keep trying to reboot Sonic, because it becomes more nonsensical as the games keep going on. I think if it was up to me, I'd probably want to distance myself from explaining too much of it. But I really feel like it'd probably be easier to just say it's some sort of weird implied post-apocalyptic Adventure Time sort of scenario where humans are next to extinct, and there's like a few of them or something, but you don't really see them, almost like Splatoon. And Robotnik is sort of around, but he's barely even human anymore, because he used to be a scientist or blah, blah, blah. But more importantly, animals, animal people, fun. You know, that's what the thing is supposed to be about, right? Fun. It's amazing how the Mario franchise does this. Like, the Mario franchise does have a sort of lore behind it, but it's almost never really explored, and no one really cares about it. No one really asks that many questions. Like, even Peach is even based on this old sort of Chinese myth involving some sort of goddess that is associated with peaches. There's a whole thing. Like, you can find a YouTube video or two about it, I guess. But it's almost sort of implied that she allows herself to be kidnapped simply out of, not boredom, but she just enjoys the thrill of the narrative that Mario and Bowser create. It's so weird. But no one cares. No one really cares. Because it's just about the fun that you're supposed to be having. It's always been more about the gameplay, which is something that you would think that Sonic would be more about, but they, for some reason, everyone really latched onto the idea of there being this dark, compelling sub-narrative going on, and it's just been that way ever since. It's strange. So, ignoring all of that for a second, speaking of redesigns, I've talked about this in the past, but specifically in regards to the Rouge redesign that I sort of did, sort of didn't do, the sort of all-white one. I do not particularly care for the way that they handle most of the designs. And as I said before, specifically in regards to the more recent ones, as time goes on, they're getting better and better about sort of cheating the general design principles behind the Sonic characters. But in regards to Rouge, she has these weird Caucasian bits all over her body because she's supposed to look like she has a skin tone, but she's also treated like if you removed her, not trying to be gross, but if you removed her clothing, then she would be like a Caucasian woman, except with this like bat head that has a single little bitty white bit of fur on it. And even her tail is flesh colored. So if you think about that, that's really gross. And her design does not really work unless she is paired exactly with her outfit. Like as just like an animal design sort of character. Like if you were making a bat character, it's pretty weird. The hedgehogs, of course, famously, all of them have that stupid goggle appearance, which thankfully they did not carry over into the movie. Really glad they did away with that. I think the movie also decided to go with, if I remember correctly, probably look it up real fast, Sonic Hedgehog movie design. Because I'm pretty sure that they also kept the blue arms design. Yes, they did. In the redesign, he has blue arms, which I'm sure that some people were absolutely up in arms about. But thank God for that. The reason why he does not have blue arms in his original design is specifically because whenever he was designed, he was a sprite character. I'm guessing here. I'm not speaking with authority, but just from a common sense perspective as someone that designs, I imagine the reason why is because he was presented as a two-dimensional sprite from the side, so you needed his arms to be a different color in order to break up the sort of foreground and background of his actual movement, so that you could track him on the screen as he was moving. Whereas if he was one solid color, then it would sort of blur together and it would be harder to track what was going on. I've never really heard a good argument for why he should have not blue arms in any other format. It makes sense in that 2D sort of solution-driven design, but whenever you move into 3D, there's not really a reason for it other than just adhering to what has come before, I guess. There's a lot of things about that in regards to like fan-driven concepts, like video games or comics or whatever. Like Superman wearing underwear on the outside of his costume is a great example of that. Where, why do you keep doing this? The reference that this was to is now over a century old. No one even understands this anymore. Visually, it makes no sense. Why are you doing this? But they keep it around because it's just always been there. So the idea that it's something that should be changed is something that a lot of more hardcore fans are extremely resistant against. So sort of the same deal with the Sonic's arms. Why is it that way? Because it's always been that way. Should we change it? Fuck you for trying to change it. Yeah, it's just one of those things. So whenever you see new Hedgehog characters show up in the comics or the games or whatever, Amy or just whomever, there's been plenty, believe me, they always have that goggle appearance. And even, I remember in Sonic Forces, whenever you could create your own character, which they did nothing with, by the way. The reason why that game sold so well is not because... It's because there was a created character. Like, developers really underestimate just how important that is to a game. But anyways, sidetrack. Whenever you went to the character creator, any hedgehog that you made would also have that problem of having these weird goggle eyes that make no sense. So they're treated as being a species trait just because Sonic was designed with them. So, really unfortunate. Sonic, the entire setting drives me crazy for this reason. Just, there's so many things that are like that. So, Styx here. You can probably tell I did some very minor sort of redesign bits to her. Of course, some of this is my style, some of this is just design changes. They're pretty minor. But one, I wanted to give her some sort of little cheek tufts. Because one, I don't like how her head blends in with the little, whatever you want to call them, hair drills? Her ponytails, I guess. I don't know what to call them. I don't really like how her head shape, the extremely round... like, authentically Sonic design setting head shape that they give all their characters. Where they're just perfect spheres. Which I don't think much of, by the way, but whatever. They don't blend too well with the rest of her design. So I feel like giving her those little cheek tufts, which I did a few iterations on. I think the little 3-point look is good enough for her. As long as the lower one is barely noticeable. I felt like that helps it to blend a lot better. And I also moved we'll get to it later, but I also moved the color from sort of linking in with that muzzle area around her face to actually linking in with those little cheek tufts. And I feel like that helps it blend the colors from one section of her body to another a lot better. I did the same thing with the way that her ear tuft sort of... It still has 3 associated with it, but they're not quite as pointy and downward focused. Now they sort of... One moves up, one is more middle-wise, and the last one probably should have been a little bit smaller than that. But it blends together with the rest of the ear. And I did that because in the original design, all 3 of them are very rigid and they all point directly down. Which makes it very difficult to draw them in some circumstances because all of them are sort of intersecting with the rest of the triangular sort of focus of her ears. Like her ears are also, as far as like the line work goes, even if it's a model, are drawing the focus back down into her head, which is fine. But you don't need 3 triangular bits on her ears that are all doing the exact same thing as well. I feel like having that one that's sort of propped up and is a little bit softer looking does the same thing without being as harsh as far as the model goes, as far as trying to implement it and whatever else. Also changed a little bit of her clothing up. I like her general clothing aesthetic well enough. I feel like the biggest problem with her, though, is the fact that she is so incredibly brown. And we'll clip that one out for YouTube. But she's sort of orange in a way. But of course she has a lot of brown elements to her design. And of course even orange itself is Like, it's just a little bit in terms of saturation value off of just being a straight up just brown. Which everything is, but, not being too pedantic about that. But she also has her clothing, which is another kind of brown. Her boots are brown. Her jewelry, for the most part, is brown. That's another thing. I got rid of her necklace because I feel like it was congesting too much of her design. Because these Sonic characters already have extremely small torsos, and this is more of a style thing in regards to my drawing. I tend to make the characters more thicker, I guess. I was trying to avoid using the word thick for obvious modern reasons. But yeah, they're a little bit thicker, bulkier, I guess would be the word. And they are not realistic looking or anything, but I sort of widen them out and thicken them a little bit and reduce their head size. Because Sonic characters look very childish in regards to, like, they're hypercephalic. They have massive heads. Like, their heads are absolutely gigantic in regards to the rest of their bodies. So I sort of try to get away from that. Like, Styx's limbs are extremely thin, as far as her original model goes. They're so thin, in fact, that it's kind of difficult to work with her hands, and especially her boots, because her boots are almost the size of her entire torso. Like, all the proportions of the Sonic... I hate the proportions of Sonic characters. I always have. It's very ugly, but it's kind of hard to get away from. So, removing the necklace helped with that. It stopped congesting her torso area. I do like the necklace, but it just doesn't look good on Sonic characters. There's just too much going on. Add a little bit more, like, bracelets and stuff to sort of move the design elements away from her torso, which looks a little bit better whenever you give the body more depth and volume to it. That way, sort of everything gets pulled outwards away from the body so that there's more weight distribution to the rest of her. So, did that. Added one or two little bits of wrap and stuff here and there, and that's pretty much it. I didn't change her too much. Most of it is just style, I think. But yeah. Always liked Styx. She is... This is another assumption on my part. But she really does look like a redesign of... What was her name? Marine? It's like a Marine the Raccoon or something? I can't remember. It was not a character I liked. It was from the characters, and she was kind of annoying. Yeah, Marine the Raccoon. Yeah, she was a particularly annoying character, and she looks very similar to Styx in a lot of ways, but she's just not particularly appealing. Her sort of mask has a little bit too much going on. Her head has that same overly orb-like appearance that I don't like. Like, even, like, the good thing about Sonic the Hedgehog or Shadow the Hedgehog, whatever, is that they have those sort of quill shapes that are naturally breaking up the overly circular nature of their heads. Even Rouge sort of has that going on. Her ears are so large that breaks up that design as well. I think, like, most of the characters do that. And by the way, I forgot to mention this. When I was thinking about perception back in the day, whenever the Sonic games were first being released, whenever Knuckles first came out, everyone thought that whenever it first was on display, everyone thought that it was just Sonic again. Because if you look at him, this, to kids these days, I don't know if this makes any sense to you or not, but whenever it came out, he just looked like Sonic. He just looks like a red Sonic, except his quills are pointed down. So everyone just assumed that it was going to be some sort of power-up or something. So whenever kids around the schoolyard got clued in that, oh no, this is a completely different character, the immediate reaction, of course, was, oh, well, that's lazy. It looks exactly the same. But then everyone saw Tails, and was like, oh, well, that looks good. Like that, and of course, then everyone got distracted with, wait, he flies with his tails? How does that work? Does his, like, spine rip apart? And we've been having that discussion ever since. Good, good old Sonic discussions. They never end, do they? Like Sonic is such a dumb franchise in so many ways. That's probably one of the reasons why people get attracted to it, because it's kind of fun to gripe about it at the same time, I guess. Also, a lot of the designs are cute. It's just that a lot of them have one or two little bits that could be a little bit better. But like I said, a lot of the new designs have been absolutely fantastic. Whisper, I think I drew her in a video on this channel. I can't remember. Most of the things that I draw, I cannot remember. A lot of my animations, I don't remember making. And whenever I see them, it's like, oh, that's weird. I did this, and I do not remember anything about it. Whisper is probably one of my favorite of the new designs, because I like the character, and I like her sort of design solutions. Yeah, I did, because I was talking about the design solutions on her, where she has that same sort of color problem. Oh, that's the other thing. The other element that I changed to Styx's design here, obviously, is that central color right there. From the muzzle all the way down to the waist. I've always liked that about animal designs. Whenever they do that number, where it's the sort of underbelly's color change, it helps to sort of furrow the design downwards so that you get more of a streamline to the overall torso without having to congest it too much. It also breaks up the color, which is something I think that a lot of the designs have a problem with in Sonic. Too many of them are, like, to use Rouge again, her entire body is that one Caucasian color, which is super bizarre if you think about it too much. If she just had like a little bit of color breakup on her, she would be fine. A lot of the characters are like that. I'm trying to think of one on the top of my head, but sure, Whisper is the one that I was talking about in that video. She has that sort of same deal, where her face looks good, her clothing looks good, but you can tell that the clothing is composing too much of her design, so that if you move her into like wearing shorts or something, suddenly she looks really weird because there's nothing breaking up the color of her entire body. You can tell that she's meant to be sort of this one tone, one volume, really black-brown sort of color across the entire rest of her body. And whereas the head has that broken up with like the muzzle shape, the eyes, usually something in regards to the ears, it depends on what character it is, then whenever you start moving down, that just sort of just vanishes, and there's no more of it. This is probably one of the reasons why I like Styx, is because she doesn't wear too much clothing in the first place. Same thing with Sally Acorn, in a way. They had to resolve a lot of her design problems in the same way. The reason why she has her sort of central color thing going on is not only just because of her reference species of chipmunk or whatever it is. It's also because in regards to design, you need something to break her up if you're not going to give her clothing like, Sonic and other characters that don't have clothing running around with. You have to resolve that in some way. So with like Sonic, he has that central sort of body plate or whatever, the underbelly color. Whereas the characters where they're obviously designed for the clothing don't have it at all. Or it's implied that they don't have it at all. So giving her that was just one little bitty minor thing that I think makes her look way better. Anytime that I try to design her, I will sometimes throw that in. So if I ever draw Styx again, I'll probably be using something that looks sort of like this design, if I can remember it. She does not currently exist, unfortunately, because she was a Sonic Boom design, if I remember correctly. And of course, Sonic Boom went the way of the dinosaurs. Yes, sir. Sorry about that. Sonic Boom, here's really unfortunate what happened to Sonic Boom. Because I don't know if it was obviously rushed. That was a lot of their problem. It's just like all the bugs, the famous Knuckles flipping into outer space problem, all the various map loading glitches and everything. A lot of that was just because they were being forced out the door, because I'm assuming their publisher, I don't know the story, again, I'm not informed about this, but usually, as is the case, usually it's because of publisher problems. But I imagine that they were being forced to release it ahead of time because the publishers decided that we will still... Like, if you ever wondered why this is a problem, it's usually because publishers come to the conclusion of... Something you have to understand is that publishers do not care about the integrity of the product. They care about whether or not they are making money, because that is their job. They're not people that make video games and have a love of video games. They're people that publish things and have a love of money and making money, getting lots of money. So they're doing whatever it takes to make sure that their investors are happy. And their investors are the same way. They don't care about making great video games and good experiences. They want the commercial value of the product. That's what they're interested in. And that's a very blanket statement that doesn't go for every single human being alive, obviously, but that's the general rule. One of the worst things that you can ever do to your company, and the best things for that matter, is to make it go public in terms of its trading. Because once you go public, then you are suddenly beholden to whatever whims that your stockholders want. What are well, I'm getting off on a tangent here, but I've always found this interesting. In a weird way, there was a game called Railroad Tycoon that I played whenever I was really little. Very old game by now. But that's one of the things that taught me the most about stocks and how the economy works and things of that nature. Because even, like, that was the whole point of the game, is to sort of operate on real-world fundamentals. So it's not too unusual that a game would teach you these things. But the moment that you became public, then if you were not always accelerating and expanding, then investors were never excited about investing in your company, and as a result, you would sort of flounder, and your company wouldn't go anywhere. But the moment that you did start expanding, you would have to keep up that expansion. You would either have to, like, even remaining consistent in terms of your growth is not good enough. You have to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Because that's how, stocks and trading works. People are investing in you under the assumption that eventually you will get popular enough that more people will want to invest in you, and then they can sell off those stocks and make a huge profit. And it's just, there's way more to it than that, but that's sort of the general principle behind the thing. So in regards to publishers and stockholders and things like that, that's sort of the problem that you run into, is they're trying to push things out the door whenever they can to maximize the amount of profit they can for the license that they hold. So in regards to Sonic, fans will buy Sonic whatever. It doesn't matter what the quality of it is. And that has been proven time and time again, because people play the games and the games are trash, and everyone knows that they're trash, like especially the 3D ones. And people will defend the quality of the games to the death, even though they're really not worth defending. And because they're foolish enough to do that, then publishers can get away with almost murder, because you will buy it regardless of whatever the quality happens to be. So as a result, Sonic Boom, I imagine, suffered a similar fate. Making a lot of assumptions here, aren't I? Probably had that same issue, where they decided, well, we could spend another year letting them develop this into something that is maybe marginally better and will be more critically well received, or we can release it now, and our numbers tell us that releasing something now would maximize the amount of profit, but it's not ready. But let's just do it anyways. Because if we wait that long, we're going to incur more expenses, and as a result of incurring those expenses, the value that we're going to get by waiting on it to get better is not going to eclipse that number, right? And the other thing that you have to worry about there is whether or not the IP will take a hit. Because if customers realize that you're doing this and you're willing to release products that aren't done just to maximize profits like that based on quarterly releases, then you damage the overall IP. But with Sonic specifically, the IP is already so damaged, and it's already been proven that the customers don't care enough to stop buying the product, that it just doesn't matter. So as a result, that's, I imagine, one of the reasons why Sonic Boom died the way that it did, and got the bad rep that it did. And I'm sure that it's bad reputation already because of the weird... Like, a lot of the fans are... I'll just say it. A lot of Sonic fans seem to draw a lot of spectrum disorder kids for whatever reason. And a lot of people have wondered why that is, and I don't know. I have no idea why. But it does happen. And it's unusual and it's interesting. But a lot of that, unfortunately, translates into things like I was talking about before, where the kids get really, really obsessed with don't change the color of Sonic's arms. Like the famous Chris Chan sort of posts, where they're just absolutely enraged at the idea of improving his design because that's the way it should be. That's the way it's always been, right? This is how it turns out. But Sonic Boom famously changed a lot of things, including giving Sonic a scarf, which I imagine was because they made him taller and they wanted a design solution for his overall look. And giving him that scarf did break up his design, because over time he's been getting taller and taller, and it doesn't look good. It looks kind of terrible. And I think Sonic Boom may have been the tallest one to date. I'm really not sure exactly. But if you look back on the original, he's this tiny, tubby little, like, cute creature. And you can't really take him too seriously. So his modern incarnation of being really cool and edgy, it doesn't work with this little tubby design. So that's like he's been getting taller and leaner and whatnot over time as a result of that. So I imagine the scarf was there to break that up. Most of the rest one, like Tails, got a little bit of a change. Amy didn't really get much of a change at all, I don't think. Knuckles got by far the biggest change. I can understand why like that's probably the one that upset people the most. I can definitely understand why it did, but his character completely changed. And again, I don't know that much about Sonic, and I certainly don't care about it that much. I just sort of like drawing the designs here and there. But I never got the impression that Knuckles had much of a personality in the first place. He just sort of... He wanted to protect the emeralds because that was his job. He was very serious and kind of stern. Didn't really joke that much. Like I can't... he's like failing the Plinkett test for me. I don't know... Like, how do you describe Knuckles without just saying what his job is, what he physically looks like? You can't, really. There's maybe like one or two elements of it, and he kind of comes across as like Qui-Gon Jinn, played by Liam Neeson. He's stern, I guess. There's just not much to him, as far as I'm concerned. I guess maybe hardcore fans might either know more or be more obsessed with it to the point where they can project things that don't really exist onto his character. I don't know. I don't know what the consensus is. I have no idea. But my impression is that he probably needed that redesign because there's just nothing going on with him. He just exists. Like, Shadow, for example, has almost no depth at all either, but he's so edgy and stupid as a result of that you don't really have to do much to him. Like, he's just such a living sort of joke as it is that, who cares? It doesn't really matter. Most of the characters, though, it does sort of... Like, Tails is a good example of this changing over time, because whenever he first came out, he didn't really have a personality either. He was... Well, technically, he wasn't even a he at the time. As I recall, whenever Tails came out, it was just Tails is Sonic's best friend. And that was it. And I think in some countries, Tails was even described as being female. But in America, specifically, I think Tails was described as being male, so they sort of just went with that canon. I forget what the story is behind it. It's kind of interesting. So there was like that evolution where they didn't stipulate anything at first, but then it sort of just naturally evolved. And the whole idea of Tails being... But I hate this trope, by the way, but Tails being this child genius that has an IQ of 500 or whatever the hell it is. I hate that shit, by the way. The whole, I'm going to invent this thing in my garage in 5 minutes because I'm so smart. I hate that in movies and just whatever. It's like a kid's franchise, so I'm not going to complain too much about it. But it's always been something I detested. But that element of Tails being like this hyper smart inventor is probably something that was just given to him because there's just nothing else going on with Tails otherwise. Otherwise, he's just some friendly, childish fox that flies around, and Sonic has to save him sometimes, I guess. Even in the old Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon, not the edgy, dark one, but the other one. The one with Silly Robotnik and Scratch and Grounder and whatnot. That was the one I actually watched. I didn't watch the serious one. I don't know if that's surprising or not. Even in that one, Tails was treated as being like a younger kid brother who, at the end of the episode, might take up smoking and... I forgot how stupid that was. Because after he took up smoking, Tails like turned into an asshole briefly. It was like a little 2-minute long segment. But he sort of turned into a dickhead. And Sonic's like, "Whoa, Tails, you need to calm it down. Because these drugs are going to your head." It's so stupid. But yeah, at the time, he was not a marvelous inventor. That was just something that sort of was given to him later to give him more personality than none. Because otherwise, he is just a design and a role. And you don't want that for your characters. So that happening to Knuckles did not surprise me, although making him so much of a meathead was probably the wrong direction to go. Even though that did result in some pretty funny stuff from the cartoon. People will say that the cartoon was marvelous. I watched all the cartoon. Most of it's not that great. It does have some really, really good things that you can clip out of it, though. Like, its highlights are great highlights in terms of the actual show. It didn't really seem to hit its stride until the very, very end of the show. And same thing with Styx here, now that we're done. Styx, I hope that they bring her back in some incarnation. IDW guys, I know you've been having talks with Sega. You get on their ass about that shit. We want our girl we want our girl Styx in there. I hope she gets a minor redesign. There are some elements that I think can be slightly improved with her, which is what I tried to do here. Her whole bit from the cartoon of being a crazy anti-government conspiracy girl, I would rather not have that either. That's not particularly great. That's not exactly compelling in itself. So I hope they do some iterations with their design and improve her over time. And we get some other good characters that have the same quality as like Whisper the Wolf or Tangle. Because those have been good characters too. Alright, so that's it for today. I'm going to get back to hopefully trying to assemble my timeline for future animations. I don't know when that's going to come up. I had the last person to get his stuff. No, the next last person was Mike from Red Letter Media. He's going to be doing the Sidious voice as a Star Wars cartoon. Had to wait on a professional VA that I had to hire in to do a Mace Windu impression. So that took the longest time. So it's been a mess, but hopefully everything will be settled. And I'll finally be able to actually just start working, which I look forward to. Alright, so until next time, guys. See you then.